Call themselves the Beatles. Now tonight, you're going to twice be entertained by them. Right now, and again in the second half of our show. Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
Hey everybody, this is Gary from Gary Paints It. Today we're going to look at painting the Beatles. And behind me we have what we call a batik. Now a batik isn't a painting, but you do painting. Painting is involved because you're painting with hot wax onto a fabric. And the word batik means writing with wax. It was developed by the Javanese in the 6th century. And so the way this works is, let's say you have a piece of white fabric. In this case, you use like a bed sheet. And you draw your image on, and then what you're going to do in this case is you're going to put hot wax on all the areas you want to keep white. And then you dye it into fabric dye. And the dye will absorb into the cloth everywhere except where there's wax. So if we put hot wax on this area and dyed it yellow, so everything is going to be yellow except what you see it's white. The wax kept the cloth white. Then once that dries, you would wax the yellow area so it keeps its color when you put it in the next color of dye. So in this case, we would have waxed the white. Now we've waxed the yellow, and then we dye it black, and the black of course overpowers the yellow. And so then what you do, you wax the black area so everything's covered with wax. Then you put it between newspaper and you iron it with an iron, and the iron melts the wax, and the wax soaks into the newspaper, and you're left with your image dyed into the fabric. And so that's what's been done on each one of these. This is the early pictures of the Beatles. And when you put it in the dye, normally you're going to have to crinkle that up and put it in a bucket or wherever the dye is. And when you crinkle it, smash it up, crinkle it up, the wax is going to crack, and it's going to create a crackle effect. Now you can control that by brushing the dye on instead of dipping it if you don't want that crackle effect, which we don't have so much of it here. And I'll show you another one that has more of that crackle effect, and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So that's how a batik is made. All right, so once the wax is taken out of the fabric and you end up with your image dyed onto it, then you can frame it in whatever way you want. You could put it on canvas stretchers and stretch it like you would a canvas. Or in this case, we sewed black material around it to create a frame and put a pocket in the top and the bottom so it could be hung from a dowel or something like that. And fortunately, I have someone in my life that is a good seamstress, and she did all the sewing. Her name's Jackie, and she takes care of all those types of things for me that I can't do. And so now let's take a look at one that has more of a crackle effect. Okay, this is a batik of George Harrison. This was based on pictures done by Richard Avedon in 1967, where he took photos of the Beatles, and he made a psychedelic image of them. They appeared in Look magazine of that year, I believe. Anyway, this is one of George Harrison, and you can see how instead of having the material sewn around it for a frame, it's actually been stretched on stretchers and put a frame it so it can be hung like a painting on a wall. And this one has more of the crackle effect. You can see it up here in George's cheek and around his eye. And the difference between this one and the one I just showed you before is the background, instead of being solid color, it was tie-dyed, and I did that a lot of on my Beatle batiks, where I would tie-dye it for the background, and then maybe the image would be black and white, but it had a tie-dyed background instead of solid color. And so that's just another way. And then one thing you have to think about when you're dyeing the fabric, in the case one, the one I showed you earlier, had a yellow background. Let's say you had yellow and blue in the same batik. if you dyed it yellow and then waxed that yellow area and then you dyed it blue to get blue, you're not going to get blue. You're going to get green because yellow and blue make green, and those colors are going to mix when you dye them. So you have to think ahead of what you want to do and how you're going to achieve it. It's not as simple as you might think. There are ways to do it, but it's too complicated for me to go into it right now, and you don't really know that information right now. Hopefully you can just appreciate the end result. And let's take a closer look at George. You can see the crackle effect more if I can maybe get a closer view of it. You can see more here area. You can see the crackle in that area, and that's mainly where you see that. You can see it here also in the orange where the background came through. So anyway, that's the batik of George, and we'll look at some others here in a moment. But anyway, I just wanted you to know what a batik was. It does involve painting, even though we're going to look at some paintings on canvas of the Beatles as well. So we'll do that now. Okay. Okay, here I'm just going to show you a batik of Paul that I did in the White Album. The White Album came with photographs of the Beatles, and this would be the photograph that I based on this particular batik of Paul from that White Album photo. But one thing I did with this particular one is in the dark area, I guess that'd be the negative area or the positive area, not sure which really. But anyway, I put other pictures of Paul inside that area. So there are really 6 more pictures of Paul in this particular batik, but you can see that crackle effect a lot more in this one. And let me give you a closer look. You can see there's a lot more crackle in this background. But anyway, there's a picture of Paul here, and there's another one right here, and here, and there, and then there's here. So there's a lot of Paul in that particular batik. So anyway, I just wanted to show you another version, a variety of things you can do with the batik. So let's look at some more. Okay, this is the large batik, or the 4 batiks put together to create a large batik. It's about 5 foot square. You saw it in the video earlier on. This is the Beatles in the early days. And now we're looking at, these are photos that were taken to promote their first movie, A Hard Day's Night. And these particular batiks have a lot of crackle. You can see it in their faces and in the background. These batiks are from the Sgt. Pepper era of the Beatles. You know, the Beatles went through different eras, and this would be the Sgt. Pepper era. These batiks here are from photos taken by Richard Avedon in 1967, and they appeared in Look magazine in January of '68. And these batiks are based on that photo session that Richard Avedon did. These pictures are from, if you had the White Album, that came with photos of the Beatles in the White Album, and these batiks are based on those 4 photos of the Beatles. Okay, these particular batiks, 2 of George Harrison. I went to a George Harrison Beatle Festival back in '08 in Benton, Illinois, and I made these batiks for that particular event. These are, you saw the one on Paul on the left earlier in the video, and the one on the right is of John Lennon, and the words inside the dark area are title of the songs he wrote for the White Album. Here's a large picture, the batik of the photos taken by Richard Avedon in '67, which he made them psychedelic. And the picture on the right is of George. This would be from the movie Help. I did other batiks of other rock icons from the '60s, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. I did The Doors, Jerry Garcia, just to name a few. Done a lot of batiks, and on the one on the left is John Lennon. I made 2 batiks and cut them into strips horizontally and vertically, and then wove them back together to create that effect. The one on the right, of course, is Elvis, the king of rock and roll. Another batik of Jimi Hendrix, his Woodstock performance, is on the left, and I pointed out the earlier in the video, the one of George Harrison from the Avedon shoot. These are paintings I did. These are on canvas, acrylic on canvas. This is from the movie Help, when the Beatles were in the Bahamas. Paul and George playing on a song. I think it was Another Girl, I think is the name of it. And on the left is a painting I did of George and Paul from the movie Help when they were singing You're Gonna Lose That Girl. And on the right is a painting I did of Paul and John. This is during the Magical Mystery Tour phase. And then on the left are the painting of the Beatles performing Revolution. You can watch that video on YouTube. And the first Beatle painting I did was of Ringo. It is on the right. And then the last painting is really 4 paintings of the Beatles on 16 by 20 canvases. Put them together to create one bigger picture of all 4 Beatles. These pictures were taken from different sources, I guess you'd call that, and just made it in one. In 2008, I went to a George Harrison Beatle Festival in Benton, Illinois, and Pete Best, the Beatles' first drummer, was there and gave a concert. And I made batiks of Pete Best specifically for him and of him, and let him pick out the one that he wanted. You can see the other batiks in the background. You can see how big they are in real life. And this is the batik that Pete Best chose, the one I did for him. And it was definitely a highlight of that particular trip in Benton, Illinois. Benton, Illinois is where George Harrison's sister lived in 1963, before the Beatles hit it big. And he came over and spent time with her there. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Gary Paints It, The Beatles. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.